Today we begin the USA's journey to World Cup glory, and while it may not be November 21st, 2022 right now while you're watching this, it is in this video because we are going to take the US through their group stage in games against Wales, England, and Iran. In this video specifically, we are going to be breaking down the tactics, strategies, and best 11 for the US to take on Wales. We'll go through that in Football Manager so you can see exactly how those things would line up and how they would impact the game. And then we're going to simulate some of those matches and see how it plays out to our advantage. This is the video about how the US can beat Wales and take 3 points in Group Stage B. Since the US men's national team versus Wales is the first match in the group stage for the US, let's talk a little bit about the broader game theory. Now, for me, it is incredibly important that the US gets at least 4 points out of the first 2 matches, so however we can swing it, we need a win and a draw against Wales and England. The reason that's so important is twofold. The first is it takes a lot of pressure off of your team going into that last match if you hold your own destiny in your own hands. The other piece is that Iran versus the US is the last match, and depending on how the games shake up and how many points each team is on, if Iran needs to play a little bit more attacking and outside of their comfort zone against the US, that plays to the US's advantage. So I really want 4 points out of these first 2 games, take the pressure off, and put everything on Iran to play a little bit outside of their comfort zone. The starting 11 that I'll be using is, for the most part, I would say 85% agreed upon throughout the community. The 3 positions that are still up in the air for me are going to be the goalkeeper. In these scenarios, I'm going to be using Matt Turner because I personally believe he saves more goals than Zach Steffen gives us with his feet and his possession abilities, so Matt Turner is going to be in goal for me. At the number 9 though, I am going to be using different strikers for different games and what I think is going to be best based on the tactics and strategies that we set up. The third position that I think people may feel very strongly about, either in favor or against, is going to be me playing Gio Reyna as a number 8. And that also means that Yunus Musah and Brenden Aaronson will very likely be coming off the bench. Now, across the 3 games, I'll be tweaking the tactics as I see fit, but for the most part, it follows a general principle, and that is a 4-3-3 high press that looks to play positively and fearlessly. The other tactic that I'll use is a 4-4-2 counter with a lower block, and that's really to close out games and to play when we're not going to be the best team on the pitch. Now, speaking of not being the best team on the pitch, I would say in years past, the US has historically been the weaker team no matter who they've played in the group stage. However, in this group stage in the 2022 World Cup, I feel like this is the first time that the US may be over and above better than some of their opponents technically. I'm going to focus my tactics on 3 main things to make sure that the US can take advantage of their opponents. The first being that I want my fullbacks to overlap a lot. I want Serginho Dest and Anthony Robinson to be very aggressive in getting to the attacking third and swinging in dangerous crosses to the box. The second piece is using my midfield as an advantage. I want to suffocate my opponents with Tyler Adams, Weston McKennie, and one of Gio Reyna, Yunus Musah, or Brenden Aaronson. I will put that midfield up against any other midfield in the World Cup. The third piece is kind of harkening back to the US's style of physicality and athleticism, but I do want my team to play for set pieces because when I think about Walker Zimmerman, Chris Richards, Weston McKennie, and if I have a physical center forward like Jordan Pefok, those are 4 big targets for headers in the box to be dangerous. Okay, those are the broad principles. Let's now talk specifically about how the US can beat Wales and watch the game unfold before our eyes in Football Manager. Wales has 2 dominant speedsters on the wings, and that is Gareth Bale and Dan James. My game plan is really centered around neutralizing those wingers and making sure that they don't have it easy when they're trying to counterattack us. What I'm going to be doing to neutralize those wings is twofold. The first is I'm going to be playing a very high line of engagement, and what I'm basically telling my team to do is to engage ball carriers on the defense as high as you can in the field, and that means that the defense for Wales isn't going to have any time to pick their head up and get balls in behind our defense to pass to Dan James and Gareth Bale. The second thing I'm going to do in this match is make sure that I'm triggering the press and tackling both of these players hard, and I'm essentially trying to get into their mind that they're not going to have an easy game. Every time they get the ball, they're going to be slammed with a tackle from our athletic players. Now, while I expect the US to play on the front foot in this game and have more possession in the attacking third, when Wales is in possession and the US is in their defensive structure, I want to make sure that we play a bit narrower so that we can take advantage again of our athletic center backs and our athletic midfield. So if our defense is sitting a little bit further back, there's not really moments where Dan James and Gareth Bale can get in behind because there's no space behind our defense. The third thing that I want to do is make sure that I'm utilizing our midfield superiority, especially against Wales. Aaron Ramsey and whoever the two are that play next to him are not going to be as good as Tyler Adams, Weston McKennie, and Gio Reyna. So I really want to be just relentless in the press and use short passing to keep possession and make them run. While we talked about this in the broad principles, I do think this is a specific key to the US vs Wales match, is having Serginho Dest and Anthony Robinson overlap with our wingers. This does two things that I think are really effective in the game against Wales. The first is on the offensive side. I really feel like this is an advantage that the US can take to make sure that if we are playing a little bit higher up the pitch, we have someone like Jordan Pefok who's leading the line, who I'm going to pick because I really think that we're going to pin Wales back, and I want a more physical center forward that's going to take up two center defenders and be a danger in the box with his head. With Serginho Dest and Jedi overlapping, that gives them more opportunities to swing balls in to the head of Jordan Pefok. Now the other side of that is on the defensive side. If Jedi and Serginho Dest are able to overlap effectively, that essentially forces Dan James and Gareth Bale to play and mark their man going back into their defensive third and doesn't really allow them to push up the field and be dangers in attack for Wales. My starting back line is Walker Zimmerman next to Chris Richards. I have Gio Reyna as an 8. And for this game, again, I'm choosing Jordan Pefok because I want a physical forward that's going to be able to lead the lines. I don't necessarily need possession or someone to check back to the ball because I'm using my midfielders, my wingers, and my overlapping fullbacks to do that. Let's see how it plays out against Wales. You can see how important the overlapping fullbacks are in these key highlights, mostly because it gives us a numerical advantage in the attacking third against Wales, and that's where two of our goals came from. Now you'll also see one moment where it was very dangerous. Wales got in behind because we were playing a high line. I understand that's going to happen, but for me, it's more important that we are able to play that, keep possession, and really be relentless and fearless again in suffocating our opponents. There you have it, guys. Use these tactics, use the starting 11, and we beat Wales 2-0 to take 3 points into our match against England. And speaking of, if you want to continue this series and see how the US can beat England, or maybe at least get a draw, watch the next video in this series. how the US can beat England.